Democrats in California are taking heat for poor planning and bad policies as wildfires rage across Los Angeles County. And a part of this is how they prioritized woke policies over safety. As I often say, elections have consequences, sometimes tragic consequences, and it's fine as long as everything's fine. But in that day of reckoning, in that day of testing, if you're not prepared, the consequences are significant. I mean, I think about what happened just a few months ago with the assassination attempt on President-elect Donald Trump. And the fact that as they delved into the hearings and looking at the Secret Service, a top priority of the commissioner was what? DEI. It almost got the president killed. Now we're looking at California. What's the top priority out there? DEI and wokeness. And literally, thousands of structures are burning, lives are being lost. Now, here's the question. We know that for the last 4 years, our nation's military has been subjected, held captive to these same DEI woke initiatives from the Biden administration. Is our military ready for its day of testing? Joining me now to discuss this and more, retired Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin, Executive Vice President here at the Family Research Council. General Boykin spent the last 4 years of his 36-and-a-half-year military career serving as the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, and he was one of the original members of the U.S. Army's Delta Force. General, thanks for joining me today.
Good to be with you, Tony.
Am I overstating the concern that when you see these entities, these agencies that have a mission to do, Los Angeles Fire Department, fight, prevent fires, Secret Service, keep the protectees safe, our nation's military focused on our national defense and our protection, when they are distracted by these DEI woke policies that take priority, they fail in their mission?
Yeah, has anybody ever shown you any of the positive results from this woke agenda that has been forced onto our military, but also forced onto our whole government? And many of the major corporations in this country today have done exactly the same thing, although they're relooking it now.
Right. So it's fine as long as everything's fine.
Not fine with me.
Well, but in the day of adversity, when what you're supposed to do is put to the test, if you have been, your energy and your efforts have been distracted on making sure you pick the right pronouns, and I mean, the military's actually put out videos.
I know.
Teaching sailors, airmen, and soldiers, and even Marines to use the right pronouns.
It's disgusting. I don't know what else to say other than that it is disgusting, because what we're doing is we're spending a lot of money and a lot of very precious time, particularly in the military, time that needs to be spent out preparing to win the nation's wars. And when you have our people sitting in a classroom because of this woke agenda, or when you have them getting kicked out of the military because they won't take a shot that they don't want, and we find out now they didn't need to begin with. That's where we are.
Are you concerned about the readiness of our military?
I'm very concerned about it. You and I have talked about it, and I'm very concerned about it, and I'm so concerned about it because, first of all, we can't meet our recruiting goals anymore. And it was I saw something today that was talking about the Navy couldn't meet theirs, and they had lowered their standards in an effort to try and meet them last year, 2024. So where are we headed with all of this? We're headed for oblivion.
Yeah.
I mean, we're destroying our military.
We are extremely vulnerable right now. Our nation is vulnerable because of our military has not been focused on preparing for its mission.
That's exactly right. And
what's the incoming administration has pledged to fix this? What are the top three areas that the incoming administration should be focused on to correct the course the military is on?
Yeah, the first thing is tell all of the DEI people on these installations, your day of undermining the chain of command of our people here is over. Take a walk. We got to get rid of them. We got to make sure everybody understands that it's gone. The second thing is we got to relook our priorities with regards to what we're acquiring, because we've got to look at what our enemies are acquiring and what technology they have that we need to be up to speed on, and maybe we need to change some of our priorities with regards to that. And then the final thing is we just need the president to go back and change the names of these forts. Now, you look at me like, well, what difference does that make? You know, as a Marine, that tradition is very, very important. You take pride in being part of an organization that has fought battles before, and these forts have seen a lot of young men and women go through there, and now we have ruined the history and the legacy of them because we've done something as stupid as that.
I don't think people understand the importance and the power of history, because our history and our celebration of our history shapes who we become and who we will be. And when we lose that history, we kind of live in a vacuum where we can redefine everything. And that's what I think this was intended to do, was redefine our military into not a fighting force, but a politically correct, I don't know what you describe, but it's certainly not a fighting force.
No.
It is going to take someone tough to correct this. And I think, and from my vantage point in the last administration, I know that President Trump never got a handle on the Department of Defense. That was one of the areas. State Department actually was making progress under Pompeo. The Department of Defense never got there. And I think that's in part why he has chosen Pete Hegseth to lead. But there's some that raise questions. He had his first confirmation hearing today. Some raise question about his past. And, he's young, which I don't think that's a problem. I mean, I think we've had very young leaders before, and I think energy, you're going to have somebody that's got some energy to come into that, into the Department of Defense and change what needs to be changed. But there's questions about his moral character that raise concerns. And I think in the military, you talk about tradition, you talk about how the military operates. It operates different than corporate America. It operates different than the political environment because you have to have trust. And that means that morality is not just a, kind of a ideological thing. It is a very practical element of building a cohesive fighting force.
Right. And up until Barack Obama was president, it was illegal for you as a married man or married woman to engage in any intimate relationship with someone. It was illegal.
Right. It
was a court-martial offense.
Right.
And now look at where we are with this. And
what was the reason for that?
What?
Explain the reason for that. I mean, there's a very practical reason.
It is all about the cohesion and the unity of the organizations. If you have men sleeping with another man's wife, then you have just interrupted or disrupted the cohesion of that particular organization.
When you're deployed and your wife or your spouse is back home, you want to know that the military is saying, I'm protecting your relationship, because anyone who transgresses that relationship between a husband and a wife is going to be subject to criminal charges in the military.
Right.
So that person who is deployed at a forward post or in combat can be singularly minded on their mission and not distracted by what's going on back home.
Yeah.
That's just one example.
I tell you, it's a serious enough issue that when I was commanding all the Green Berets, I relieved a group commander. A group commander is a brigade commander. He's a colonel. And I relieved one for exactly that. And I could have court-martialed him, but I looked at the situation and I gave him an opportunity to resign. And he did when he realized that I was going to fire him and take him to a court-martial anyhow. So this is a serious issue. I mean, it's a really serious issue. And look, if you look at what has happened to our military since our president, our current president, that is, Joe Biden, has been in office, you've got, across this country, you've got people that don't want to even talk about or think about joining our military.
Right.
And how are we going to sustain? You ask me, are we suffering in terms of readiness? Yes. And part of it is because nobody wants to serve in the military anymore, because there's a generation of people right now that were forced out of the military because they wouldn't take a shot.
Right.
Over 8,000 in the Army.
Speaking of that, I want to transition to one final topic before we leave. Just got a few minutes left. President Biden yesterday, speaking at the State Department, kind of giving his farewell address on the foreign policy front, he said, I'm quoting him, compared to 4 years ago, America is stronger. Our alliances are stronger. Our adversaries and competitors are weaker. We have not gone to war to make these things happen. During my presidency, I've increased America's power at every dimension. The world is on fire. I was reading the Armed Conflict Location and Events data, which is an independent, impartial, international nonprofit group. In the past 5 years, that encompasses the Biden administration, conflict levels have almost doubled. The world is on fire. This administration has been a failure from day one.
Nobody but Joe Biden believes that, and I'm not even sure that he believes it. Anybody with a brain, anybody with any understanding of what's going on in America does not believe anything that he said there. He was wrong on every point, every point.
You were a part of the attempt to rescue the hostages in Iran,
right,
under Jimmy Carter's administration. Ronald Reagan came in, and on the day that he was sworn into office, those hostages were released. Donald Trump has drawn a line that those hostages in Gaza that Hamas is holding has to be released. What's at stake for him in making sure that's fulfilled?
His credibility, obviously. I mean, listen, I was glad to hear him say that. But this is a different regime in Iran at this particular time, and Iran has a lot of influence over what's going on there. I hope that it does turn out that they release them over the weekend, but I remember it was on the day of his inauguration that they let those hostages, after 444 days, let them out and brought them home.
The Israeli hostages have been held longer at this point. We just have about a minute left. What can Donald Trump do if they're not released on that day of inauguration?
Well, the first thing is he's going to have to pull out the stops on all opportunities that we have to use U.S. power, and that means power in the economic sector. He's going to have to sanction them to the extent that they can't even buy bread, I mean, he's going to have to do a lot of stuff. What he can't do is go in and make a parking lot out of Gaza, because that would be the thing that a lot of people would ask for.
Well, it's almost that way now. I mean, 90% of the residents of Gaza are displaced already. I'm glad he said it, but I just know that the bar is high, that it has to do it in order to maintain his credibility internationally. Now, there's movement that says it may be happening soon, but we will see. General Boykin, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Good to be with you.